The Spin-off Podcast Network.
This episode is brought to you by AWS. Amazon Q Business is the generative AI assistant that can securely understand your business data, summarize results, and streamline tasks. Learn what Amazon Q Business can do for you at aws.com/learn more.
Hi, I'm Anna Rafferty-Connell, Head of Audience and Senior Writer at The Spin-off. Right now, only 2% of The Spin-off's audience supports us financially. The future of The Spin-off depends on doubling that number. Please visit thespinoff.co.nz/SOS to read an open letter about why we need your support today.
You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is brought to you by Spark Lab, offering inspiration and practical advice to help businesses find their edge. To hear more about Spark Lab, including details about the latest events, workshops, and business tools, visit sparklab.co.nz. And now, here's your host, Simon Pound.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Welcome to Business is Boring. Growing up as part of a small, self-sufficient community on Aotea Great Barrier Island set today's guest up for solving some of the biggest problems in the world. Tama Toki is the founder of Aotea, a skincare line, and Aotea Energy, which focuses on renewable and shared microgrid energy solutions, starting with Great Barrier and then heading for the world. Tama's businesses create products and businesses with community, connection, and purpose at the heart. And today, Tama joins us to share his journey, the ideas guiding his work, and the future of energy. Tēnā koe, thank you for being here.
Tēnā koe, Simon.
Hey, so tell us a little bit about growing up in, such a magical place and the kind of really special character of Aotea and Great Barrier Island, where it's not like pretty much anywhere else, eh?
Yeah. It's, you've been to the island, I think, and for those that have been there, it's in the Hauraki Gulf. There's no utility there for power, and it's quite remote, especially growing up there in the 90s. But I grew up on the Papakainga there, pretty close to the community. And I think, naturally, as a consequence, you kind of live close to nature and you understand kind of those kind of subtleties in nature, which is quite cool. But it's, pretty remote. In the community where I'm from is Catherine Bay on Tairehare, and that is a remote part of a remote island. But very lucky, I think, growing up there, I didn't kind of, I didn't appreciate it. But the older I get, the more I more lucky I feel.
There's a remarkable thing if you are living in a place that has to live in balance with the land, in that, there's no supermarket today still, right? And there was a lot less in terms of amenity and just pop down to the shops in the 90s.
That's right. Yeah.
Having to be self-sufficient in food, energy, water. And these are things that people could not take more for granted today in most places, but have been like the most real problems that humans have faced across all of time, right?
Absolutely. No, it's kind of interesting when you look back and you can only connect the dots sometimes looking backwards, and with as you describe it, no supermarket, no pharmacy, and the I suppose that the business we have is like a direct manifestation of that upbringing, and with no kind of pharmacy or kind of health product provider or kind of area to buy or retailer, you kind of become a bit more in touch with the native flora, and that is, as I say, a direct manifestation or direct expresses itself directly in the products. Things like kawakawa, komaraho, harakeke, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah,
tell us about that as your first business that you built, kind of with the community, and to tell the stories of and share the knowledge and experience of the community was Aotea Skincare. Tell us about their business.
Sure. It's not a super unique experience. A lot of people that grow up in rural areas kind of have exposure to what's referred to as rongoā Māori, which is a kind of like a herbal practice, if you like. But my grandmother was a practitioner, and through the process of osmosis, although, maybe not being directly kind of taught, you kind of, go out and forage and all that kind of stuff. And it is actually quite wild to think, when we first kind of got set up there, people don't believe me when I say this, but we actually had like dirt floors in the home, no power at all. And when we were sick, it was almost always on the wood stove, a pot of komoroho being brewed. And it's, experiences like that have kind of shaped the business. And the mandate of the business has always been to find ways to create jobs in the community. And we've got things like scholarship for rangatahi Māori, because there's no high school in the island. I was very lucky to go to Auckland Boys Grammar. But all those things kind of, that framework, I suppose, shapes the direction, shapes the product, shapes even kind of how we brand and try. I mean, originally anyway, we're just going through a bit of a rebrand, but the packaging was like handwritten labels almost. And that was because in our, kind of cabinet of concoctions, my grandmother would always write what tinctures, what kind of remedies were on or in the jars and so on. So that informed how we designed the packaging, all that kind of stuff. So it is a real, as I say, manifestation of that upbringing.
Yeah, and there's always been a real generosity through the products too, in the way that you've shared those stories and that you're sharing kind of, some of the most special kind of elements of your upbringing, community, the flora of the island, It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's so interesting. There's something called the Waitangi Tribunal, the Y262, which is probably the most well-known claim, and it was brought in the early 90s with regard to giving rights to flora and fauna. And my grandfather was one of the original applicants. So there's like a really direct or connection to the, I suppose, the taonga or the rights that we think that, these things should enjoy. But part of that is, we are big believers as a family anyway that like tikanga should live and breathe and it shouldn't be ornamental. So things, like for it to kind of exist and to live and to thrive, if you like, or to be brought into people's psyche and I think it's quite important. And as a consequence, being vertically integrated, so we've got a farm, we grow all the flora, extract it, do everything ourselves. And it's important that we do that because it means we have control, if you like, over how we run the business, how we treat the flora, how we harvest, blah, blah. But that is interesting, as you say, kind of sharing these things. And with the relationship with Air New Zealand, we are excited that it gets to all four corners, or not all four corners, but it's in the hands of clientele that I think really appreciate that kind of story, if you like. But it's been a real journey for sure. And navigating that kind of side of things is interesting all the time.
Yeah, tell us about the way you've built the business, because you're mentioning there that you've got the farm and production at home. You've also got that I think a lot of people, as you've mentioned, you're in kind of gift bags and lovely spaces with in New Zealand. And many people have probably encountered the beautiful store in Commercial Bay over the years, right? Yeah, tell us about how you went about kind of starting that business and how did you galvanize the community behind you?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think it's an ongoing bit of work, to be fair. We're really proud as a community to be doing what we're doing. I mean, we keep to ourselves. As I say, we're in like a corner of a remote island. But it is quite special when, your relations, your cousins or nephews, nieces go to a high school that you've been to. And part of that is, the scholarship program we have is that if there's any opportunity to kind of enjoy commercial success, that there is a halo effect that the community benefit from. And it is really important to keep coming back to that because sometimes, we are in some significant export markets and we've had to turn down opportunities because we haven't had the ability to actually meet those orders. And it's purely because our back end won't handle it. And we kind of, early on, had, I suppose, the realization that when you have that value stack, it kind of informs the decisions you make because, you can compromise on how you make the product or you can contract manufacture, but because we've always believed you make the product yourself and you go through the process and we're finally getting to stage, Simon, where we've actually got that back-end infrastructure set up. We've got scalability, but you kind of go kind of like lockstep with the community with these things. And we're just going through the process at the moment of working with our current honey supplier, who's kind of a neighbor of ours, and kind of essentially acquiring their company, so that we can bolster our supply of things like Manuka honey, Manuka oil. We've got an industrial distillery, Kawakau, Komoro, Harakeke, Ramomo Rako. But the other thing that's really exciting as well, and a lot of people don't realize this, but Māori had an affinity for even marine bioactives. So we've got a marine license to farm various forms of seaweed as well as mussels and all that kind of stuff. But that kind of fits within our 10, 20-year roadmap. So that's really exciting to be looking at as well. But the community is a huge part of it because they're the ones that are working with us on it. So
That's so cool. And like, it's a hard business, the world of skincare products like that. Even if you do just go to a contract manufacturer and buy the materials and don't have to think about any of that stuff behind it. It's like quite low margin, like a huge amount of inventory that you have to kind of carry, big costs in packaging, a really mature market. And to be able to build the business as well as building out all of the back end and the manufacture and the sourcing is a really it's a huge undertaking.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when you think about it, you when you're living and breathing, you don't really understand, like, I suppose the scope of the difficulties that you kind of, because every day you're having challenges, whether it be there's a freight issue or I don't know, there's a product that's gone off because we make it ourselves. We had to do a big recall out of Japan, which was horrific. But I mean, these things just kind of come with the territory when you're doing everything yourself. So with all the spinning plates, I think it's hard, but it's also super rewarding. And I think that because we are kind of dealing with whakaaro Māori, taha Māori, all these things, it's just important that I think, we not keep control for the sake of keeping control, but it means we can run our business in a way that we think's correct. And that's really important. And hopefully we get all these things right. And the other thing too is I think it really reflects in the story when you can show that, you can take people to the farm, you can show how it's made and all that kind of stuff. It goes a long way. So it's challenging, but I think, and customers are really smart these days. They're always looking for like authenticity, integrity, and it's really hard to build a brand when you don't have those tenets anymore, I think. So yeah, it's challenging, but it's also fun, and I think it's good.
Yeah, and it always like buzzes me out that, so many of the brands that we surround ourselves with in that world, like Aesop, for example, like they have kind of a natural feel, but it's all petrochemical based. Their products are wildly petrochemical based. Yeah. And it's owned by a massive international kind of like capital owner. It did start as kind of like a cool thing out of Melbourne, and it has some real kind of, cultural integrity, right? But now it's like, and no shade on anything, right? Yeah. But like you dig a little bit deeper in that and it's not natural, and it's certainly not kind of part of the actual life of communities. And then as you say, customers are clever, and then they get into that and they learn about the integrity of something like Aotea.
No, it's so funny you say that. When they sold to L'Oreal, maybe 18 months ago, 12 months ago, we actually had a lot of people come to the shop saying, "Hey, we used to, love Aesop, but now they're L'Oreal." And I suppose that kind of like the color it gives a consumer is like, we want to support smaller guys, whatever, or that authenticity gets lost. And so, we've kind of directly experienced it ourselves, actually, kind of people moving from, not that we're kind of super premium, but we have, it's just really hard to keep up, that kind of legacy brand DNA or personality, I think.
And when it kind of feels natural, but it's not. Yeah. And then you are natural. And it's kind of wild how much of the world of cosmetics and skincare and hand washes and stuff is petrochemical.
Oh, it's I mean, it's
wild when you have a look. And so, what stage, like what scale is the business at now? Because you were mentioning some international markets.
The business is finally at a stage. Having said that, we should have been this morning go through numbers. It's always been like, you kind of balk a little bit because we have like kind of tipped a bit into this recent venture. But the business has strong foundation. We've got good supply chains. Yeah, kind of. We've now built the platform to look at scale. At the same time, which is I suppose the real aspiration of the business is to make enough money to get into the more biopharmaceutical space. And it's the reason being, and it might sound like a little bit waffly, a little bit like kind of fluffy, but the reason being is that we think that the rākau Māori like wants to be a bit more respected or wants to kind of have work done. So you've got that anecdotal history of our people in the country and all that kind of stuff, and then you've also got the efficacy you want to kind of underpin that anecdotal history with. So we've got an R&D program that we've committed to, that we're looking into things like the plant agents and things like kawakawa komaraho in particular. Also Aclonia, which is brown and red seaweed. So those things are really exciting because, I mean, it will take years, but now we've got a bit of free work, cash flow to kind of invest into these areas. And so, the packaging, as I was mentioning earlier, we're going through a bit of a rebrand because it's now reflecting that kind of clinical look. And we're launching from Aotea to Aotea Health in about 3 or 4 weeks in a bit of a soft way before Christmas, and then doing kind of maybe a bit more noise around it hopefully next year.
Yeah, that's so cool. And, with the path that Manuka honey and Kanuka honey have now got in terms of some of the claims that they can make and the science behind them, green lip mussels, there's so much interesting science there.
Totally.
And, they're just 3 of the things that have been used across all of traditional
for
rongoā,
sure. For sure.
Like it's really cool to go, how do we expand out that that portfolio of claims and knowledge to protect that, right?
No, it's actually really interesting. I saw that this morning Fonterra are looking at selling some of their value-add brands. And I think it's just really, I think that if you think about the resources or the country, or I think the big opportunity is around creating like a vertical integrated brand, like a legacy brand. I don't know why Fonterra are looking at kind of selling, because I think the commodity prices for milk solids, or this is what I was reading, is doing quite well. But like any commodity, it's cyclical. You want to like protect the business so that you can weather just with kind of like a product that's a little bit price inelastic. But what we are trying to build with Aotea or Aotea Health is, I mean, Convita have done a good job until recently, in my opinion. But I don't think there have been many kind of consumer brands that have cracked that nut around like an aspirational legacy brand built over decades. That's kind of our thinking. It will take decades. We launched in 2019. I think we're actually the largest vertically integrated skincare company already, which is quite cool. Standards low because there aren't many people that run a farm and all that kind of stuff. But the idea is to tell a good story, make a good product, and have the science to back it up, and build a strong brand that gives you good pricing power. But I think I can't think of many if you think about the areas New Zealand can play in that are it's our native flora you can't have anywhere else in the world. I mean, the country experienced 110 million years of isolation. So you've got biodiversity here that's nowhere else in the world. So you've got defensibility around that, which is how we look at it. I mean, Manuka, the flower, as an example, it's got a terpene that you can't get anywhere else in the world that bees go to. It's actually really hard to process, but they process that into honey, and the terpene forms an amino acid called methylglyoxal. And that is, you can't have that. There's not one flower that can produce that quality in the world. And that's one bit of our one part of our kind of our flora, and there are others as well that are really, really exciting. So that's what we're looking at, and that's how we're thinking about the business as well. It's like generational rather than kind of so that we're going to try and build that foundation out now, which is really exciting.
And like you mentioned in terms of the ownership and being the standard bearer, sitting with the traditional custodians of these products is really important, both like in a story and a IP and protection space, right?
Totally.
It's been really interesting to see the work of people like Manu Kadi and following along the wins that are finally being had at these international United Nations level spaces, recognizing those rights, and really cool. And
Absolutely.
I imagine a big responsibility to be a standard bearer, right?
Oh, it really is. I'm very lucky. My sister is ex-Harvard now at Oxford, and she's doing a PhD in law around the problematic commercialization of Indigenous IP. And so it's really cool to have someone like her kind of giving us, with light touches, kind of like a bit of the direction. But I think, Manu is just such an amazing, I mean, truly, it's really inspirational. And it's also inspirational for other, like, iwi taketake or like Indigenous people. So a lot of the time, we are looked at for, how to protect language, how to protect, kind of Indigenous, thinking and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I think if we can do that in a business sense as well, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, love it. And the coolest thing is, like, this is only kind of like half the story to talk about today. Let's come back in a moment and talk about the innovation that you have cooking in energy. Spark is proud to partner with the Sustainable Business Network and the Climate Action Toolbox. The free Climate Action Toolbox can provide you with simple step-by-step guides to measure and reduce your emissions. Help lead the way to a low-carbon future for New Zealand. Visit sparklab.co.nz/sustainability to find out more.
Kia ora, I'm Duncan Grieve, founder of The Spin-Off. The threat facing media in this country is existential, and we need your help to make sure The Spin-Off survives. If you love what we do, visit thespinoff.co.nz/SOS to read our open letter about why we need your support, and please consider making a monthly contribution.
Kia ora, Toby Manhai here, editor-at-large at The Spin-Off and host of the Gone by Lunchtime podcast. If you enjoy The Spin-Off and would like to see it continue, right now we really need your help. Please visit thespinoff.co.nz/SOS to read our open letter about our future and sign up to be a member today.
Hoki mai anō. Welcome back to Business is Boring, where we're with Tama Toki. So, talking about the Aotea Made now moving to be Aotea Health, that's only part of the story, right? Because over the last few years, tell us about the work you've been doing, again linked back to that background of self-sufficiency around energy coming from a beautiful remote part of an island that has no grid, no power infrastructure, no retail of energy.
We're getting really excited, I think, at some of the prospects in this space. I suppose the backdrop to it is, as you described it, there's no utility or third-party retailer of electricity, so you have to be self-sufficient. And naturally, when kind of similar to the the rongoā space, you just pick up how these things work through osmosis. But I suppose the real driver arose out of energy poverty. So a lot of those that live in the community still are really exposed to not having a warm home and all that kind of stuff. And you naturally have all those issues that arise out of that, like, health problems. And I suppose it's just it can be pretty, especially in the winter, pretty destitute way of living. Those that live on the island are like, super, self-sufficient, but the community I'm from is, it can be pretty hard. But so that's kind of, the backdrop. When we looked at really doubling down on production and how to actually kind of build a business there, we had to figure out, how to actually run energy, kind of how do we have energy security and energy resilience. And so we looked at putting a big battery bank down, a big solar array, and then you realize with infinite generation that you have a lot of surplus. And so we looked at how we'd share it. And that's kind of where the idea was born, to pilot and trial with on our whenua Māori or Papakainga that we, this idea of a smart microgrid. And so we wrote a feasibility study for the government, and we got our lead consultant was a professor of computer science that's been researching microgrid architecture for the last decade. And that has really informed the business that we've built. It got presented last year at the World Renewable Energy Technology Conference in Barcelona, which is pretty cool. We're co-authors in the paper. But that's what fell out of that, or kind of that bit of research, was with the price dropping around solar or generation batteries, there are some really interesting innovations that are kind of people looking at. But to build a smart microgrid, because of the compatibility issues across the tech stack, our consultants are saying, look, this is what we've done for you guys is like a bit of a how do you say, like a model, but this model is just an approximation of what it, what it could be. You can't buy these things off the shelf. So the idea is that you'd have a battery, in your home would speak to the neighbor's home and understand the weather, would know how much deficit they're in, putting out, bidding with tokens, all the rest of it, and then figuring out who to send power to. And all those things are there, but you have all these power electronics like solar controllers and inverters that also you need to recruit into the tech stack. And if they can't talk to each other, or you don't have access to the internal registers, then the whole concept doesn't work. So 2 years ago, we formed the company to essentially build as best we could from the ground up the battery, the power electronics, and the software layers. And we have now we've built a series of batteries. We've got a bit of government support to put these systems into the homes on Aotea. So those going in January 15 next year. And so every home of the Papakainga is going to get a battery built by us. It's going to get our software, and the way it's going to work, all the tools we've built mean that, if there's a cluster of homes and they're figuring out who needs the power, we're building the software intelligent architecture to facilitate the transaction, how the power's moved around. And we see massive applicability for these kind of tools throughout the national grid. And that's kind of where things are at the moment. I hope that made sense because I kind of confused myself just then.
No, it totally does. And so what you're saying there is in order to bite off even the smallest part of it, like sharing power from battery to battery, you had to actually build the entire stack from the battery to the software to how the cells interact to how the weather is.
That's right.
You can't bite off a little bit. You've had to do the whole thing.
Well, I think you can. The only thing is that, let's say you get a provider of an inverter, and then they kind of do a bit of a firmware update, and it stops speaking to the batteries that you bought from, let's say BYD, an inverter from Fronius or Electronic, and then all of a sudden there's a firmware update, they stop talking, and then all of a sudden the whole system shuts down. So it's kind of those things that we saw as being problematic, and especially as you think about how quickly the space is going to take off, because everyone talks about AI, machine learning, but this is like a huge, not so much AI, but like a huge machine learning component to it, because we've already got our product so we've got a warehouse in West Haven. And we've got a big we've built a 50 kilowatt hour battery there, big solar array. And we are now the team are wrapping around on the front end, the machine learning programs to do weather, API access, wholesale pricing in the electricity space or electricity market. And then kind of figuring out, okay, anticipated load, what they anticipate the price to be, and make assumptions around what to do with the power. So it's quite cool because we are kind of in the back end anyway, kind of, building this thing. And I think, when we've got a few sites that we're going out to just very quietly anyway, just kind of continuing to build out the product and cut our teeth again on making sure it works. But I think it is the right approach, because in terms of trying to own in a proprietary sense, have access to the whole ecosystem, just because it gives you you can safeguard yourself against what can happen, especially if some providers kind of start to close off access. You're getting there with EV chargers at the moment. A lot of EV chargers are kind of, that they are closing off access to batteries and all the rest of it because they're trying to build out their ecosystem themselves. That's kind of where we are, but it's the landscape's changing all the time.
Yeah, and it is, isn't it? It's an incredibly big moment for solar and batteries, and now the price curve has dropped to the point where it becomes more affordable and a much better option than going for any kind of central command, national grid approach.
Totally.
Yet, the innovation and the people leading this, it's not government, it's not the big gentailers, it's small innovation, which seems kind of bananas.
No, I think it's so interesting. How do you say this? It's not necessarily breeds innovation, but it was a father of invention, but kind of, and then you've got market forces that have arrived that make it possible. We've got a direct relationship with cattle, so they're the same suppliers as Tesla. So, because the traditional supply chain for batteries is super horizontal, and because we are essentially procuring all the cells out of, we're not doing any innovation in the chemistry space. It's more around the integration across the tech stack and the kind of control protocols. But we can produce a battery so much more, a more affordable battery than everything that's on the market. We're getting the same prismatic cells that Tesla are, and we and as I say, the supply chain is super horizontal for batteries, as in the finished product. Usually from the cell providers, it goes then to like a place that configures, then loomed, and then imported via a wholesaler, and then to a retail, then installed. So you've got across that supply chain, you've got about a 16 to 32% margin, depending on the player or the actor in the supply chain. We are capturing all that ourselves. So we've got the ability, similar to on the health business, to be honest, it just gives you a bit of freedom, bit more oxygen. You're not, it's not incumbent to sell huge numbers to actually kind of make your money and get the scale of economy. We can kind of play around with just taking, a few bites of the apple. But that's important because, as you said, you're actually, number one, it has to be affordable. You have to, because, if your lights turn on, that's all you really care about.
Yeah.
But if the prices are as volatile as they were of the last winter, I think we're arriving at the time where we can pretty much produce a kilowatt hour of energy cheaper, or in a way that's more affordable than the gentailers. Yeah.
And that's wild, right? Because tell us about the situation in New Zealand in the power system, because we are like, 80-odd% renewable, which is amazing in the global context.
Mm-hmm.
But then the rest of it, we're importing coal and burning it and doing some pretty dumb things. If this can be done more cost effectively than current gentailers without building more massive dams and massive infrastructure and transformers and pylons and, there's so much infrastructure involved in this.
Totally.
It seems to me bananas that we're not trying to run hard at it.
I completely agree. So I was actually in Wellington speaking at Parliament once a few weeks ago, and the whole thing was, where's the vision in the country? I think that realistically, this country could be truly the world's first electric economy. I don't know why no one's kind of, in government anyway, picking up the mantle and saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. And obviously, you've got to stress test and road test it. But I think, there are so many kind of angles. It's super amorphous, the whole entire landscape. But yeah, a couple of things I think, and you pointed out that we're bringing in to firm the grid anyway, or, kind of we've got natural gas for peaker plants, all that kind of stuff. But I think sometimes people forget the distinction between electricity and energy. And in terms of the energy matrix globally, we have reduced our fossil fuel consumption by about 3%. But our in terms of it, the energy mix, so it's gone from like 85, 86% down to about 82. But our consumption of fossil fuels has gone up 15% over the last, 45% over the last 15 years. So we are consuming more energy. At the same time, more electricity generations coming online. But I think that distinction is sometimes missed. And I think, globally anyway, you still have 9% of energy needs being serviced by wood. So you've got Southeast Asia, India, parts of South America. So all those things I think are important to consider, because if we're going to be electric, you've got transport, you've got heating, and then you've got all this data kind of storage and our lives being totally...
And there's a lot of EV drivers in America driving on coal, and a lot of EV drivers in China driving on coal.
Exactly.
Burning coal to charge their electric cars.
That's right.
It's insane.
It's insane.
Yeah.
And I think, maybe it's kind of willful blindness, and and those things. I think we kind of forget that we are kind of producing more electricity from renewable sources, but our fossil fuel consumption is still rising. And so those things are really peculiar to me. And I think as a country, we've got the perfect demographics: 5.5 million people, the same size as Sydney, give or take. I mean, why can't we be the world's first to actually kind of, show or lead or be the flag bearer for how we actually tackle this problem? And I mean, there's no silver bullet, as everyone says, but, if you take the low voltage networks are already quite congested, and if homes can go offline to some degree and you don't have to actually have more infrastructure upgrades on the low voltage or medium or high voltage networks, that is a big win. And so if most houses can get, even without solar, if you can put a big battery in for a good price, and then over the lifetime of that asset, it can arbitrage against, it's by 10 cents a kilowatt hour, and then it can send out at 30. You can actually monetize that. And so not to say, it's not as simple as that, but I think that's kind of our thesis, is that if intermittent generation is going to come online in the way that we anticipate it will in the next 20, 30 years, you're going to need so much more storage. And that's where we're playing first. We're building batteries. But the battery is, I suppose, I don't want to say Trojan horse because it's got negative connotations, but it's the conduit or vector through which we can actually kind of have demand response or demand flexibility services and things like that. So yeah, with our battery that goes into a home and generation, it can figure out what the weather's doing. It can anticipate load. It's smart, so it knows the home and what it needs. And then it's thinking, okay, great, I'm 80% state of charge. I know that the family's on a holiday. I'm going to dispatch everything I can because the price is at this. I'm going to hold on because I know that the price is going to be better in another 2 hours. All those things we're working on, which is really, really exciting. And it's, you need more generation, but you need more demand response as well. And there are other guys like Base that are absolutely crushing it, doing awesome stuff around like kind of, getting a good feel for what's happening in the home. So it's a really exciting space to be in.
It's exciting times. And it feels like, if every single home in the country had a battery tomorrow, we wouldn't have to build a new anything in terms of power. We've got enough power there. It's just we all try to use it between 6 and 9 a.m. and between 5 and 8 p.m. And so as a result, we have to have, it's like you build like a 50-lane highway that's only used
once a
day.
Yeah, totally.
And if we could just have a battery in every home and then people pull power down overnight while it's cheaper and store it and then use solar during the day. I mean, we're home and it's so solvable and it's so cool to see that you're doing the work to make this a reality, right? And it's really interesting that you're doing it on the two fronts. One, in places that are truly self-sufficient, where it's about energy independence. And like you say, there's like that extra onus in that you can't just get it wrong because that's people's energy, like lifeline. But then also you've got the market dynamic side of it, which is within the grid and where you can do things like store and then share or sell power back. And that becomes really interesting because I reckon now that it's cheaper to do solar than pay power over a 20-year lifespan with the, current cost of cells and batteries, how many Kiwi would be interested in becoming their own little generators and selling stuff back to the grid? Like people are going to be like making turbines and like it's awesome,
sure,
man. Like, for sure. Why aren't we turning like all of the sheep fields into like solar panel fields?
Totally. I think there's so many kind of iterations of how you what you can do here, or like there's infinite permutations of, I suppose, there's this. I mean, energy. Energy is the most significant contributor to GDP growth, other than population growth, rather. So having access to energy is really important, but it has to be affordable, because that way, if it's not affordable, you lose manufacturing, you lose like the ability to actually kind of offer services and goods for a good price. But no, I think it's just so embedded into how we live. As you say, if you have distributed energy assets throughout the country, it does go. It will help. And yeah, I think the country is kind of thinking about this as a vision, all that kind of stuff. But as you say, you're getting people in rural areas building kind of pumped micro hydro, getting ahead of tanks, and kind of putting their own dynamo in, and actually kind of building their own stuff, which is really cool. So you get a few mad scientists kind of coming out of the woodwork and playing around with hydrogen, all that kind of stuff. So it's a really cool space to be in.
Oh, it's super cool. And what stage are you at now? As you were saying that you're building batteries, you're building the software, you're piloting this. You've just come through the Creative HQ program. Tell us about that. Like, what's the moment for the energy side of the business now for you?
What's the where are things at?
Yeah, where are you at?
Yeah, it's such a good question, Simon. I think, we've built the product. The product works. There's a whole bunch of compliance that we're going to go through, because essentially it's an inherently dangerous product.
Yeah.
But no, I think, we're getting a lot of conviction. We've had walkthroughs and people come through in the industry. We've just recently hired the ex-lead electronics engineer from Fisher & Paykel, which is super exciting. And so we're looking at kind of firming the team up and kind of plugging gaps and getting the right team to kind of, to scale this thing. But we haven't raised. The product's built, the underlying architecture works, and now it's a matter of us figuring out how to take this to market. And we have a lot of flexibility because we're not beholden to investors. And I think we've got to hold fast to our vision, because you get quite excited. We've had inbounds, people saying, hey, we would love to start ordering your batteries, B2B, we'll start installing them, blah, blah. But we're not ready for that. And I've got to be careful because, there'll be a bit of a, the space will move quite quickly. And if we're not at the bleeding edge of what's going on, we'll probably get left behind because there's a lot of velocity in the whole area. But we've got a few sites lined up before Christmas to put our assets into. So they will be participating as a gentailer. So that's really exciting. So we will give them the tools to, the battery and the software to essentially participate as a retailer, which is great. We've got all the licensing for that. And then next year, we'll probably look at launching. We don't have to shoot the lights out next year. I just want us to get a good number of customers that love the product, love the brand, love what we're doing, and they become, those that kind of tell people. We want to be quite. We think that it's really important to get this stage right, and to make sure we don't go over our skis and have bad customer reviews or have people that have really bad experience with the install process. So that's kind of where things are. But like anything, you kind of launch dates always get pushed out. And so we're hoping to launch next April, but it's probably going to be 6 months after that. We'll see.
Well, it's just such a difficult space, right? Because if there's one thing that we as people are good at doing, it's taking miracles for granted. And like the fact that any time across history, the fact that you just switch a light on and there's power there and it's safe and it's stuff is actually the biggest miracle,
It's magic, really, yeah.
Everything. But the second it doesn't work, what the hell? I can't believe that it's out. These people are incompetent. You're like,
100%.
So you're in a very difficult space, right, in terms of people's expectations.
Mm-hmm.
As a couple of thoughts, like, what would your, a couple of things we'd like to ask everybody, what would your advice be for people who do want to build businesses that solve real problems that are not just, because I guess one of the big themes of this podcast is like, I think a lot of people who don't know business think of it as a bit of an individual kind of enterprise or something. But every company's about the people and the networks and the relationships, right? But in the businesses you're building, it's even more so, right? Because it's part of your community, whānau, like there's a lot of other things than just the leader or whatever. So, what would your advice be for people who do want to build businesses as part of a network community, whānau?
There's a certain power I think you get when you truly realize, or you're doing it for like there's a greater good, and that is it's quite a profound experience because business can be really, really hard, and when you have, despite those like vicissitudes, when you have like this idea that you're doing something for other people, or I know it sounds super cliche, but it's like an infinite like reservoir of strength, I think, and I feel super lucky kind of having that wraparound or that kind of like underlying support from the community, and that goes a really long way. It goes a really long way. So in terms, I think it's also really challenging though, because you've got all these participants or players that you work with, and but if you get it right, get the balance right, I think you can go harder, faster, longer, I think.
I love it, man. That's fantastic. And then as a final thought, what will success be for you, and what will success be for Aotea?
I think a strong community. I know, again, it sounds really cliche, but a strong community, number one. Number two, I like how, those that live on the island or where I'm from or family, they get a lot of pride in what we're doing. We're looking at areas that I think the country has a natural advantage in, and we want to build a global business over the decades. That's kind of, I suppose, where things are now. Strong community, number one. Number two, I think success for Aotea is, identifying areas that we as a country have a natural advantage in, and build like a global business. I know it sounds a little bit like kind of lofty, but on Aotea Health, it'd be very hard for anyone to replicate that business. So it gives us like a bit of a moat to the business. Similarly, on the energy side, I think the country should be looking at how we can be 100% electric or renewable, and kind of being in those areas where you kind of, there's like the tailwind, or there's it's really exciting. But yeah, I think I would love to build a business and show or at least signal that it can be done. I mean, got to get through the next 6 months first, but that's kind of how things are.
That's so awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing some of the stories so far, and can't wait to see where you take it next.
Kia ora, bro.
Kia ora. Thank you so much to Tama Toki. Thank you so much to you for having us along in your ears and listening, and to everyone who helps make this happen, like our producer, Te Aihe Butler. If you do like what we do, please do rate and leave a review. It really does help. E noho rā.
From the Spin-Off Podcast Network, that was Business is Boring, brought to you by SparkLab. Make sure you're following Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information on SparkLab, visit sparklab.co.nz.
Kia ora, this is Toby Manhire, here to urge you to tune in to Gone by Lunchtime, a podcast with me, Annabelle Lee Mather and Ben Thomas, tackling the world of New Zealand politics, from policy to polling, from scandal to psychodrama. Listen to Gone by Lunchtime, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network, wherever good pods are sold.
Do you find it hard staying optimistic with all the financial news in the media? I'm Bernard Hickey, and on my podcast, When the Facts Change, I'm here to help you navigate the ever-changing landscape of economics in Aotearoa. So join the conversation every Friday on When the Facts Change, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network in partnership with KiwiBet.
The Spin-Off Podcast Network.